So it is starting the recording and transcription. And I will say that I am happy and thrilled to report that this meeting is able to be conducted virtually. Now, I am not thrilled for the reason, which is because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but I hope that we are able to, in the future, continue these meetings, as I think we actually get better outreach and higher satisfaction from staff who are donating their time to these meetings. So, with that, what I would like to do is, we got an email, I should say, at like 4:45 about FOIA protocols, and I am fully committed to doing absolutely everything to ensure open meetings. So if I have to change something later, I will do that. What I'd like to do is just run down the line and briefly have everyone and just say hi and their name and what they represent in the group. And what I will do is call you in groups of threes. That way we can just run through this rather quickly. So I see Daniel Neighbors, Dennis Leach, Catherine Frum.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Neighbors with the Assistant Bureau Chief of Transportation Engineering and Operations.
Thank you.
Hello, Dennis Leach, Director of Transportation, Arlington.
I'm Catherine Frum. I'm a teacher at HB Woodlawn and avid cyclist.
Gina Maria Jillian, who actually has her name this time. Awesome. And then Kristen. Gina Maria.
Hi, sorry, I was on mute. Hi, this is Gian Maria. I'm in the committee and I work as a finance officer in Washington, D.C. in a financial institution for developing to help assist developing countries in infrastructure, particularly transportation and renewable energy.
Jillian?
Woo. Hey, I'm Jillian Burgess. I'm the rep from the Bicycle Advisory Committee.
And thank you for pulling double duty tonight, because I know they're having a meeting too. So
2 headphones.
Woohoo! I can't pull that off. I'd like to be listening on another meeting. I just don't have that talent. Kristen, then Lauren, then John.
It's like walking and chewing gum. Kristen Haldeman, Director of Multimodal Transportation Planning for APS and Staff Liaison to ACTC.
I don't know what the order was, but Lauren Hassel, Safe Routes to School Coordinator, and I work with Kristen very closely.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Armstrong. I guess I'm past chair. Is that the term?
Sure. Emeritus.
But so I'll mention I've got a 16-year-old who's now driving to high school, and then I've got an 8th grade or 7th grader who's riding the bus to Gunston, and then a kindergartner who's riding the bus to Key School. Thanks.
Thank you. So Libby, then Dave McBride, then Zara. I'm sorry.
Hi, Libby Garvey. I hope everybody had a good summer. Hope people had a summer. And I'm your county board liaison. I'll probably mostly be monitoring. I think David Pretty is my counterpart on the school board, I think.
Yes.
And mostly be monitoring and probably monitoring one other meeting too, but I'm happy to be here. It's nice to do these virtually. Thank you.
And Libby, I want to thank whatever encouragement you found with the county people to help support this. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Pleased to support.
I'm Dave McBride, principal at Kenmore Middle School, and I have an 11th grader who's a walker this year and 2 older kids who graduated from APS.
Hi, I'm Zara Seastrunk, and I'm with Arlington Transportation Partners, the new ATP representative to help with staff with any transportation issues.
I'm loving your what I think is a real background of all those plants and stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
It is often the joke of what backgrounds we have with Microsoft Teams. So thank you for that. I am Josh Fold. I am the chair of this committee. Elizabeth Kiker is pulling double. My vice chair, who will be chair next year, is pulling double duty over at a joint bicycle advisory and pedestrian advisory council. I live on the south side of Arlington and Columbia Pike. In my separate but day work, I am a math teacher in Arlington County, but I'm not here as a role of an employee. So we ran through the virtual meeting protocols. The start of school transportation update. We have the routing update, driver shortages. I was listening to something on NPR about Prince George's County also experiencing this, so not unique to Arlington. And hot topics for the call center. Hey,
Josh, do you want to do the minutes?
Oh, thank you. So I sent out the minutes last night. I know that everyone was eagerly by their email to read those. I did not get any feedback from anyone that they were concerned about those minutes. However, did anyone note any concerns with them? So what we will do is we'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Easiest way to do that is just to put a yes in the chat. If you can't get to the chat, giving a thumbs up because we are recording the meeting will be just fine. My cat votes yes, apparently, in the background. And Kristen, of the voting members, how many do we need to say yes? Have we reached our quorum?
How many do we have? 1, 2. Oh, lost track of the chat. Correct, Libby. You do not vote as the liaison. So we have, let's see, John.
4, 5, 6, 7. I think we definitely have enough here.
I think I think so. Yeah.
Thank you, Kristen, for keeping me on track. So now to the start of school transportation update. So Kristen, do you need to share screen or how do you want to do this?
No, I'm gonna speak to some of this. We were actually doing a transportation update for the superintendent. So Kim and her team put together the routing update for us. So let me just grab that from my email. Okay, so first week of school, we had 151 buses on the road first week. And I guess comparatively speaking, the last time we had a typical year, we had 159 routes, I think, and that includes both general education and special education. We had 14,197 assigned riders for regular general ed transportation. And we had 494 assigned riders for special education transportation riders. So in 2019 and 20, we had a combined total of a little over 17,000 students assigned to special education and general education. And the special ed number, interestingly, was up around 800 at that time. So just, based on what we're seeing, the numbers are down. But we also know that some of our students are attending through the virtual academy. And Josh, you mentioned that there's a town hall for those students this evening. So
their buses are running perfectly on time. I will say that.
Yes, they are. So you know, it's different than a typical year by a little bit. So we'll see how things go over the course of the year, to see if we start seeing, you know, numbers kind of creep back up again. We are at full capacity with our buses. So, you know, and I think, as most people know, during those first couple of weeks of school, we kind of let things settle in before we, you know, really make any pronouncements about the service. Let's see. Oh, Jillian, it was 14,197 assigned riders. Yeah. So it's, you know, we'll give it some time to let the ridership settle. You know, for those of you who have been around for a few years, you know, the presentations that I've given in the past, we estimate about 67% or so of our eligible riders end up riding. So right now there's some crowding on the buses. And I think, again, what we'll do over the course of the next few weeks is to, you know, look at how they balance, or how they're balancing out. And if we need to make some adjustments and tweaks to take care of some of the crowding, we will do that. Let's see. Next on the agenda, does anyone have any questions about that? I mean, that's just sort of a straight by the numbers update right there.
Yeah, just one. When you say we're at full capacity with the buses, do you mean every bus is assigned to routes basically as much as it can be, or do you mean the buses themselves are each assigned to like the maximum number of people?
Well, the buses are not necessarily assigned to the maximum number of people. They could be. What we're saying is that if we had to, we would be able to use all the seats on the bus. Does that make sense? So in other words, we're gonna, you know, we have some routes that are full, like up to 70 students for elementaries.
Like there's no COVID. That's what you mean by full capacity.
Correct. There's
gotcha.
no capacity constraint.
Gotcha.
So yeah, and pretty much, you know, all the routes that can be assigned are at this point, which, you know, kind of segue into bullet number 2, which are the driver shortages. So we're down about 26 drivers right now. And ideally, I think our budget book has us close to 200. But we are not quite, I think, covering all of our routes right now. We have pretty much everyone in the transportation office who possesses a CDL is driving. So our 2 safety staff people are driving. Our cluster leads are driving, and I think any swings that we have are driving. So it's definitely all hands right now. And when I say, you know, we're out 26 for starting the school year, that doesn't speak to, you know, every day. We tend to have, you know, a certain number of drivers that are out for one reason or another, you know, these days out sick, for obvious reasons. But, you know, in addition to COVID, other reasons, or they might be, you know, on FMLA or something like that. So coming out of the gate and being down 26 is a tough spot to start off with. As a percentage, like relative to our peers, and I don't know if anyone saw the article over the weekend, Prince George's County School District was down by like 190 drivers. I want to say Fairfax is down 100, and maybe Montgomery County was down 200. Or it was the other way around. I can't quite recall. But so this is it's an industry-wide issue, and right now, unfortunately, we're competing with our peers in other districts for drivers. So that's not a position that you want to be in at the start of school. So what it does mean is that we've already, had schools inquiring about buses that, the students are not getting home at the time that we expected to bring them home. Some of the routes are, we have to combine, or we're, picking up a group of kids from one stop and taking them, either in or home. In some cases, I think we may have had to double back. So you get into this situation where you're cutting or combining your routes. So Kim Wilkes, we were in a meeting this morning, and I think she said we have five people who are currently interested in a driving position. And so we're starting the process with them, and hopefully it's we'll be able to get all 5 of them. But as you all know, I think driving a bus requires a commercial driver's license. So it's no small task to hire and retain drivers. Happy to take any questions about that, and we'll try and answer them to the extent that I can.
Do you know if Art is having the same challenges as on the school side? And WMATA, I don't know if you hear anything from your partners over there.
I'll let Dennis speak to Art. Certainly, I know at Metro we were always recruiting.
Yeah, Kristen, I'll just mention from the Art perspective, we are able to cover all of our routes 7 days a week with the drivers that we have. We do offer full-time positions, benefits, and we have increased wages for entry level, and that has really helped with driver retention. So I would say school bus drivers and public transit drivers, the fields for recruitment are just a little bit different.
And Libby asked, do we need to pay more for drivers? I have a gut answer, but I'll let you say, yes.
Yeah, it's I think it's a starting salary of something like $17 an hour. I mean, it's it's a tough position to hire for. We've talked about this in the past at meetings. You've got 3 hours in the morning, a midday open, and then 3 hours in the afternoon. There are some opportunities for overtime with our athletic routes and activities and late buses and things like that. In past years, there were field trips you could pick up as well. Some during the day, some afterwards. But and on top of pay, and related to pay, we have drivers that are coming from, out of the county, a ways away, because, Arlington is, it's tough to live in Arlington. It's tough to afford a place in Arlington. So that is also, I think, part of our issue. But in terms of pay, for those of you who, remember we were working with the consulting firm out of Boston, MIT. They had done work for Boston Public School System. And I had an opportunity to talk to one of their folks, and their drivers, they either retire or expire. And that is really the only way they leave Boston Public Schools, because the pay is very good. Massachusetts, of course, is a different, state construct for that kind of thing too, but. Jillian.
Is this an area where if we could put more high school students and middle school students on public transportation, we could basically be using drivers that have full-time jobs and benefits and are easier to recruit for, and maybe take some of the pressure off the need for the part-time school bus drivers?
Well, our drivers are, they're considered full-time. It's a 60-hour or 6 hours a day time. It's a 30-hour week, and then they can get overtime and work their way up to 40 plus anything after that. So they're paid up to 40 at a straight rate, and then overtime, I think, is time and a half. To your question though about transit, anything we can do to help reduce the demand on school buses, certainly would help. One of the issues, and we've talked about it too, is coverage, and having the county sort of, more blanketed in transit than it currently is. And so we, and we had that presentation probably 2 years ago now from William Jones with Art, just kind of talking about how the transit development plan is put together. And, Dennis, feel free to chime in, but, you look for density to place your transit service, and we have good service in areas where we're pretty dense. There's just other places in the county where we're not very dense. Dennis, if you wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to look at it. We've been working with APS for a number of years on this to look at how ART and Metrobus align with school locations. And what you see, particularly with the elementary schools, is they were built on available land in the 1950s, 60s, and early 70s at the periphery of the county, in our lower density neighborhoods that actually don't produce riders all day and don't even produce many riders on the peak periods. And so, it's been a bit of a struggle with the match. We would love more schools in a location like where Key is, right there in the metro corridor, but actually most of our schools are in fully surrounded by single family neighborhoods. So we have that just land use challenge in terms of trying to coordinate. I think one of our more successful partnerships was trying to get some students to try transit for HB Woodlawn. And that was a productive partnership where we actually got a fair number of people that took advantage of the free fare to board buses and go to HB Woodlawn. I think we'll continue to work with Kristen and her team to look at sort of productive areas where we can actually find Metro or ART matches that can deliver schools. But we still have that bigger geographic challenge.
Well, and for middle schools and high schools, which I think is where we were targeting public transit use for students, we've got the Heights building that you mentioned. Washington Liberty is central. Ham is not that far away. Swanson, TJ, and the Career Center are all in more dense areas of the county. So that maybe there's some areas to run, routes that only run basically at school bell times.
Well, that's the other issue with the challenge, and Kristen, coming from Metro, I think has a great appreciation of this. That ART runs basically about 19 hours a day, and we run 7 days a week. And so to get the use out of our 70-some buses, it means actually finding productivity early morning, mid-morning, late morning, midday, and the APS peaking of trying to get a whole lot of people in one place in an hour also proposes some challenges that have to be worked through, because our local bus system simply isn't sized or staffed to do surge service for an hour or two in the morning at 8 p.m. It's really sized to provide line haul service for basically about 18 hours a day, a little bit less on the weekends.
Right, but from what I'm hearing Kristen say, every little bit will help. So it's not a matter of having every high school student take art and art serve every student that needs to get to Washington Liberty, for example. But if we could bring the pilot back, if we could maybe adjust some more routes so that it takes a couple routes out, then we could relieve some of the pressure.
Yep. I would love to bring the pilot back. So I'm hoping our economic position will.
Let's put that in the notes that that's something we still continue to support and want to continue to explore. I mean, my desire has always been that somehow we come up with a plan that allows all kids to ride anything with rubber wheels and a fare box in Arlington, but that's.
Can I ask a quick question? In the budget, I guess there is an allocated amount for all the bus drivers that are needed, correct?
In the budget book? Yeah.
I guess the allocated amount is for all the bus drivers, not just the 26 that we have so far.
Right. So in the budget book, you'll see, how much we have budgeted for that we think we need. It's just a matter of finding them.
But I don't know if this is going to solve the problem. Is it mainly a question of the payment from the seven? I just read the article about the county in Maryland that the range is from $18 to $32 per hour. Is merely a question of the amount of dollars per hour that we cannot find drivers. For example, I know that the schedule is very bad because they work 3 hours. There are maybe another 3-4 hours where they don't work, and then they need to come back for other 3 hours. Do we have the resources, or we can allocate resources from other parts of the budget? I know this is probably extremely challenging because I was working with the school board, and it's always difficult to reallocate resources. But what if we also cover financially the gap, the 3-4 hours gap, with some sort of a compensation? I mean, would that help? I mean, is that because we cannot find drivers because we don't pay them enough, or because just there are not people qualified?
I think it's a lot of things. I mean, certainly if we paid better, I think we would attract more people to the position. You'd still have to be trained to drive a bus. You'd still need a CDL, it's still a strange schedule. So, but yeah, I think certainly the better you pay, the better luck you'll have in attracting applicants.
And do we have the resources to pay more than other counties or something?
Well, that is a good question. I think right now we're working under a very constrained budget, but I think this year, certainly the fact that we're starting out so low on drivers, I think it's become very clear to our leadership, and certainly to our new Chief Operating Officer, Dr. John Mayo, that this is an issue. So, and the Budget Committee is meeting tonight as well. So hopefully, Josh, you added something in there about driver pay in your comments.
I talked about pay in general, which looks like needs to be 6% higher just to keep up with inflation next year. And that's going to be a tall order. So let's move off, but because I know we have a bunch of interesting topics, and let's why don't you give your comments as a whole on walk, bike, and dismissal conflicts, and then we'll have an open discussion for a few minutes after it. So if you want to run through all of those parts together.
Sure. I think about the call center, the one thing I just wanted to mention is that this year, with sort of so many moving parts and everybody like coming back after having been away for almost a year, we had pulled together a family call center, and I just wanted to mention that because it was school and community relations kind of spearheaded it, and then the transportation call center sort of helped feed into it, but they were addressing IT issues, enrollment, registration, extended day, food service, and transportation. So, but it was good because we're had a team of people who were able to answer questions, which is really good. So we had more than 700 calls on the first day of school, and then also a lot of emails that day as well. So I think the on the walk bike side of things, probably the thing that we have struggled with the most are crossing guard shortages. So we were short, of course, last year, and we came in also, still short this year. In the end, we started out with 18 crossing guards. And Lauren, you're going to have to help me to remember how many we used to have back in 2019, 23. So we lost 5. ACPD has been able to cover 33 locations with those 18 guards. And it's, because we have staggered start times, so that worked out. We do have one more that is in training, not this week, but next week. So that's good news, and hopefully we'll be able to staff another couple locations that we were missing. I think we ended up with 8 locations that we had come into the school year thinking that we would like to have staffed that we were unable to staff. School dismissal conflicts, I'm just going to jump into that and then maybe have Dan and Janice address the pedestrian call buttons. School dismissal conflicts, we've been getting calls from a number of schools, primarily about traffic and cars backing up and buses having a hard time making it through. So Hoffman, Boston, Claremont, I had to go up to Oak Ridge tomorrow, Randolph, Dorothyham, all with like backups out onto the streets. So Lauren and I are going to be doing some triage, going out and visiting some of these locations. Dennis, I've got a couple of your team members who are helping out with some signage that we're trying to deal with. Oh, Montessori is another one. But I think collectively we're going to have to do something about all of the driving. And I know this year we're in sort of a strange space. People may not be, they may not want to be on the bus just yet because there are a lot of students on it. We did implement hub stops, but for some of these schools, they're neighborhood schools, and we're still seeing the driving. So I think one goal that we should have for this year is to really kind of zero in on what we can do to really try and curb the driving habit that we have to schools. Jillian, yeah.
So I just reached out to some of the networks that I'm in to check in, see how people thought about the first week, and I sent Kristen a bunch of stuff. But 2 things I want to just bring up here because it's specific to school dismissal conflicts. One is I'm hearing that bus stops that are near other schools, a lot of the hub stops are near other schools, and sometimes it's a neighborhood bus stop that happens to be near like the middle school or something, that those buses are getting caught in the traffic for the other school. So for example, my kids' bus stop happens to do this. It's very close to Science Focus Elementary, and we can see the bus coming in the morning, and it's just stuck behind all of the people driving to Science Focus. Science Focus. And so the school dismissal conflict ends up impacting all of us. And then the second thing was, so I asked, is there anything that's driving people to drive? Some people mentioned COVID, but one thing they did mention is they're not clear on what the contact tracing policy is on the buses. And having a clear contact tracing policy would make some families at least feel more comfortable taking the buses. And the other thing I heard was hub stops. People are finding that the hub stops are too far away. That maybe if we added a few more hub stops, infill. I'm a full believer in the hub stop concept, but some bus stops are seeing more than 20 kids, and like maybe that's an indication that we could have 2 bus stops. And some families are saying to get to their hub stop, they have to cross the no-cross roads on the Arlington map. Or multiple no-cross roads. So that sort of, all of it is leading together to people driving. So some ideas that maybe reduce people driving.
Thanks.
And then Catherine, do you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, sort of piggybacking on what Jillian said. I wonder if this is a message that principals could put out at back to school night. I feel like something's getting lost in translation, where I was just thinking about this today. I think every parent who drives feels like they need to, and they are only one car, so they probably don't see it as the bigger problem. And if this was something that each school community could take on, perhaps at back to school night, where things like what contact tracing is like on buses, plus the need for us to think about the impact of every individual driver on a whole school. I don't know if it would be a letter that we would send home or something that each principal would bring up at back to school night. But I do think when it's coming down from so high up that people aren't maybe hearing it as much. I know it was sort of mentioned at our school, just encouraging anything but driving. And I pushed back with the language and obviously didn't go anywhere. I said, I think we should discourage driving. And there is a negative sound to that didn't go over well at my school. But I just wonder if we can bring it at each school community level a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Actually, I was talking to the principal or emailing with the principal at Randolph today, and that's kind of what I was saying. It's like, can we talk to your PTA? Can we come to your PTA meeting? How about back to school night? How can we get to everybody? But you're absolutely right. I think we really have to zero in on some messaging.
And can I offer, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, that if Kristen or some other staff could go out and take some pictures of the backups and say, it's not just one car, and saying, we're all in this together, and here's what's happening because we have so much driving going on. Because, where you stand on an issue depends on where you sit. And if you're sitting in first in line and don't realize what, it all is, maybe it'll help. John?
Yeah, I would also, I think this is a great idea. I think it should be brought up in the schools, or maybe we have a campaign, because it's not just backing up, it's a safety issue. I'm at Jillian's bus stop, and so it does make it more difficult when an option school stop is right in the mix of an elementary school, because we sort of add to the problem, and we get caught up in the mess. And I think the message really needs to go to the parents and to the caregivers, because there was a family drove right through the stop sign, and they had a little kid in the backseat. They were getting ready, taking their kid to drop off at Science Focus, and they drove right through the school bus stop sign. And I kind of yelled at the guy, but it's the parents. The cars, there's not enough room for all these cars, and it creates a hazard. It's definitely a safety issue.
Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Dave, I saw your comment. I think one of the things with the buses, and this is something Kim and I have been messaging, is at the very least we have a list of students who are assigned to buses. So if there is an exposure and we, and that goes through the channels, right, then we do have a list of students who have been assigned to the bus. We don't always know who's actually riding. And we won't until we have something like a tap card, like a smart trip card. But at the very least, and Jillian, this kind of, is worth sharing, is that we have a list of kids who are on the bus. So we I think would be able to send out emails if if we found that there was an exposure and the bus, those who were on that bus needed to know.
But I thought last year, didn't they have seating charts? They were supposed to be spaced apart and the windows were down?
Well, yes, no. I don't think there were seating charts. There were seats that you could sit in, right? And we did have students we always have students who are assigned to the bus. It's just we had, last year was just 11 and then 21. Now it's a lot more, but we do always know who has been assigned. So even if Johnny is not on the bus or not riding, his family might get an email that says, well, there was a student on bus 417 who had COVID. We are sending this out to all of the parents or all of the families of the students who are on that bus. So if you were not on the bus, you might say, well, I'm not on that bus. But you would at least know that there had been a student on that bus with it.
But I guess that goes into the conversation about what is contact tracing and who would have to be informed, because it's only if they're within 3 feet unmasked in the building, and maybe it's different for a bus. I mean, we wouldn't inform someone of a possible exposure unless they definitely were a close contact.
Sitting on the bus.
Yeah, so if they were unmasked, sitting right next to each other for more than 15 cumulative minutes, then then it could be a close contact. But if they're spread out and they're not, and they keep their masks on, then they probably wouldn't. But what I was really going to say is, it goes into the bigger conversation about trying to get people back on the bus, because for the school where I am, the car traffic, and I knew this was going to happen, because in hybrid, we had 25% reduced capacity, right? So we had 250 pushing 300 kids in the building as opposed to 1,000. We had a ton of cars, right? We send out the encouragement, please use, the bus, please walk, carpool, whatever. This year, it's always a lot in the first week of school, but it's been a lot. And we've had police out front helping us. But even they were like, it's a lot, and we have event parking in the back. But like was mentioned earlier, it coincides with Carlin Springs buses being released. So, we can message to parents, but if they're not able to carpool or they're not willing to use the bus, I mean, you're going to be sitting in traffic in a little mini, traffic jam around your school, which is not good for anybody. So, yeah. I mean, everybody's been patient so far, but I will message again to our parents, please carpool or, take the ART bus. A lot of our 6th graders weren't familiar with the ART bus. We still got complaints from the Arlington Mill neighborhood because it's within the walk zone for middle school, and then they got a bus when they were in elementary school. So they had to deal with, some 6th grade parents. But I do think getting the ridership on the buses to go back up would help everything.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Any other comments on that?
I'm just looking at I got an email. Was it Vision Zero? We need to flip flop because Do I got Chris.
Oh, Christine.
Yeah, she said she'd be coming a little bit later.
Yes,
So
maybe she's at the BAC meeting.
possibly, yeah. There's a lot
Very
of
possible.
double, tripling.
The only thing I wanted to add was about the
Sure.
pedestrian call buttons. I think
Okay.
maybe everyone has seen in inside Arlington or one of our other communications that the push buttons were going to sort of revert back to their previous stage. But we had this conversation at JCTC, and Dennis Way was there, and she said that there are some places where the buttons will remain automatic. And so I wonder if you could just update us on that.
Sure, Kristen. I'll go ahead and get started, and maybe Dennis can fill in. So basically, when COVID hit, we turned 93 signals to fully pedestrian actuated. The plans are to roll back about or go to pre-pandemic operations on about 70 of those signals. So you know, more than 20 of those would remain as fully pedestrian actuated. The locations that are fully pedestrian actuated are basically in our urban areas, or busier corridors. The signals that will go back to push button activated on the side streets will still be fully on ped recall. So when we talk about rolling back the COVID intersections that are fully pedestrian, that are fully on ped recall, where a pedestrian doesn't have to push the button, we're talking about the mainline crossings. So the side streets, in general, on most of our crossings, pedestrians don't have to push the button. It's the crossing the main line where they have to push the button. So an example of some of the locations that we know that we're changing, Lee Highway has 21 locations where we're going back to the pre-pandemic operation where pedestrians have to push the button. So that just kind of gives you an order of magnitude. Yeah, I guess we'll answer any questions that we might have on that, or see if Dennis has anything else. Hey, Jillian has her hand raised.
I didn't mean to cut Dennis off. If Dennis wanted to add it.
No, I would just mention, just to fill this out, that Arlington has approximately 300 traffic signals. The highest concentration of signals in the county are in our metro corridors. Our metro corridors are going to remain pedestrian activated. So the majority of our signals in Arlington will continue to be pedestrian activated. The corridor with the most signals, probably where we're considering the rollback, is Lee Highway. And I believe we're still evaluating the Columbia Pike corridor.
So I had a comment and a question. One comment was when the original announcement was made, a map was posted on the press release that wasn't really easy to read, but it did have, specific to schools, signals near Dorothy Ham Middle School and near Washington Liberty High School, crossing Washington Boulevard, I believe at Stafford, and then along the Pike near Randolph. All of those were marked as going back to recall, which was odd. And then the question I had was sort of the timing and process of this and the messaging. It seemed like this was just dropped out of the blue. There wasn't any, engagement on it happening. And then when it was messaged, it said it had to do with schools reopening, which seemed exactly the opposite of what we've been talking about tonight, about wanting people to walk to schools and making it easy to walk to schools. And the quote that was given to Greater Washington said something about needing pedestrians to pay attention, which seemed like it was out of the blue. So can you talk about the timing and the messaging here?
I'll go ahead and get started and see if Dennis wants to fill in. But basically, the timing is kind of based off of where we see traffic patterns going up back to, numbers and volumes that were closer to pre-pandemic. So that's kind of really, part of the timing right there. And again, I'll just highlight that, when a pedestrian does push the button at the locations where, we're planning to roll back, is that they get the same, pedestrian timing, they get the same pedestrian phase and the same safety factor as during the what we call the ped recall during this COVID time. So yeah.
When you say traffic counts, do you mean only car traffic counts, or are you seeing a decrease in pedestrian counts?
We're saying, like, the primary areas that we're talking about doing the rollback is not in the metro areas, but on, Lee Highway is one of the examples that both Dennis and I gave. There's 21 intersections on that corridor that would get rolled back to the pre-pandemic operation.
I'm just saying, you said traffic has gone down. Do you mean car traffic has gone up? Did you look at pedestrian traffic, or did you only look at cars in making this decision?
But we're looking at all traffic in general. That's a good question.
Okay, so you have the count numbers. That's great. The pedestrian counts.
Well, we have counts, not everywhere, but we've been starting to collect counts to compare what the pre-pandemic levels are to how traffic has progressed over the COVID period, and we see it kind of matching more generally where it was pre-COVID.
And the messaging that this was related to schools, that seemed contrary to safe walking to schools.
Yeah, I mean, so the messaging is really kind of more towards everybody returning back to normal, so to speak, if we can call anything normal anymore. But people going back to work, a lot of that coincides with schools. So I think that's probably the messaging is maybe kind of getting mixed together, because those are both happening kind of simultaneously. But that's a good point, Jillian.
Yeah, I think the federal government's still not back.
Yeah.
Jillian, it's department by department. DOD has a pretty sizable workforce back in Arlington. So it really varies, really by individual employer, and even in the federal government by agency.
Well, thank you for this discussion on this topic. It certainly is, I'm sure it is also a fine balance to try and make it all work. So thank you for that.
Yeah, Josh, if I could just
Please.
add one more thing. I do want to just let ACTC know that the school staff has requested that we look at specific signals associated with schools around the immediate boundaries. And so that was at our last JCTC meeting, and we are taking that up and looking at it.
Great, thank you. I really do believe that this committee, and then I'm a listener on JCTC. I really do think that there is a lot of value that happens with these conversations.
I forgot that was another feedback. I've got to put that in the email, but another piece of feedback I got about hub stops was that pedestrian recall buttons weren't turned off for hub stops, since you had a lot of kids crossing various streets, but nobody to push the button necessarily because there's no crossing guard. So anyway, I hope if you're looking at schools, you're also looking at the hub bus stops that serve a lot of students.
And we now have John Carden is joining us. John, thank you for joining us. Could you just real briefly say your role in this?
My pleasure. Thank you.
So, We just finished up with Kristen. What did you have with anything left on start of school transportation?
No, not at the moment. We're week 2, so still easing into it.
Yes. So where would you like to drive the bus next, as it were? Do you want to do a TDM update? Do you want to do, because I know we're going to see if for Hope Vision Zero for Christine.
Right. So let's do Safe Routes. Lauren can give us the scoop on Safe Routes, where we are these days, and of course tie that into our walk bike start of school and things that we can do for some of the schools we're experiencing traffic difficulties. And then we can do the TDM update. I think, Zara, you may be the only one on from that shop, but we can deal with that in a minute. So Lauren.
On the Safe Routes area, I'll keep it quick. We did some things that are out of the ordinary because this is an out of the ordinary year, but we were busy before school opened with Innovation and Cardinal, the 2 new neighborhood schools, preparing special walk navigation maps for those 2 new walk zones, and having several kind of community gatherings, open houses to talk about routes. And we had many engaged individuals and families who showed up and wanted to figure out the best way to walk and bike. So we had a lot of excitement around that. We were feeling very positive. We delivered a lot of vests to various schools, also anticipating a lot of foot traffic, worked with police to deploy the VMS, the variable messaging signs, in strategic locations around schools, pedestrian flags to the extent that we have them. We either replaced or added new ones where needed. So those are all kind of the things we had planned on doing. We've also been preparing for the typical fall, which is atypical after last year, but Safe Routes to School event, Walk and Bike to School Day, Walk, Bike, and Roll to School Day is coming up on October 6th. So we're getting ready for that. We're getting ready for the annual counts that we do, which we did not do last year, the tallies of how people are getting to school. And that'll be in late September, early October. And we're also working with folks in the county and Prince George's County to put together a proposal to get some grant funding for traffic garden templates that could be used around the region. And I guess the only other thing is we've had a lot of comments that would normally be in the public comment period. Several families, parents wanted to be part of this meeting. So I have some input that I want to make sure I submit or somehow gets captured. So Josh, just let me know how to do that. But primarily it's from Dorothy Ham Middle School. We have a lot of concern around 5 points, around a lot of the intersections around there, the pedestrian buttons, and all the things we've covered. So just for the record, I will send that along. Any questions?
And Lauren, if you wanted to submit that to Kristen, and we could even, what we do is put it in, she'll get the information, and then she could put a, just piggyback it into the minutes if you wanted.
Okay, great. Yeah, already did that. Just wanted to make sure there wasn't another way to do it, just to be official.
I am far from the expert on these things. We're all learning together, but that would be a way to make it officially a concern.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Where do you want to go from? Where do you want to go next on this? Okay, Zara.
Am I next? Okay. Hi, everybody. So as far as TDM goes, I've been working on updating the transit information displays at APS schools. So we're actually working on creating new maps for the displays, updating them with the latest transit information, some of the routes that have changed since the last time we printed those maps and put them up in the lobbies. So we're working on that. I'm also reaching out to people to place orders for transit brochures. I'm sure some of those are also pretty old and outdated and need to be refreshed. So that's what I've been working on. We do have a couple of events coming up in September that you guys might be interested in. The first one is next week. We're hosting our Shared Street pop-up transportation event in Roslyn this year, which is going to be new for us. This will be our first in-person event since the start of COVID, so we're hosting it outside and encouraging people to wear masks. All the vendors and volunteers will be wearing masks, and the ATP volunteers are going to get tested prior to the event. So it's going to be a little bit smaller than our shared street pop-ups that we've done in the past, but we're still planning on handing out free food. We're going to have live music, free bike tune-ups, and Bird's going to be on site providing e-scooter safety training. We're going to have a little area where people can test ride the scooters. We're going to have a couple of DES staff on site talking about Vision Zero, which will be new. We haven't done that before. We'll also have the mobile commuter store on site, and of course myself and other ATP staff will be there to answer people's questions. We do think that right now there's been a lot of changes with transportation, and with WMATA and ART ramping up service starting this week, we want to make sure that people know what's going on, have an opportunity to ask questions and get them answered, and explore different transportation options, starting off in Roslyn. The other event that's also coming up on September 22nd, as I mentioned in the chat, is International Car Free Day. So this is an event that it's global, actually. A lot of cities around the world encourage people to go car free for one day just to try other options and see what our cities would look like without so much traffic and congestion. So I think this would be really great to promote, especially to families as they're thinking about transportation decisions this fall. If traffic continues to get worse as more people get back on the road, this is a great chance to sit down and remind people that they do have a lot of options available to them. And we do have flyers and promotional graphics and stuff that we could share to help spread the word. So yeah, that was it for me.
Wait, you know that person?
So thank you. Are there questions for Zara?
Zara, did you happen to have a list of mobile commuter store scheduled stops by any chance?
I do not. I would reach out to Bobby Greenberg about that. She's, I believe, coordinating the mobile commuter store right now. But yeah, they do have a lot of events going on. They were at Langston Brown Community Center this past week, in the middle of that crazy storm. And
I think they'll be at HB tomorrow, the 9th, and I know toward the end of the month at Wakefield. But yes. I don't know anything beyond September.
I think they're also going to be at the Career Center at some point. I'm not sure about the date though. The event, I'll drop the link into the chat here so you can check it out.
Okay.
It's exciting stuff.
Thank you. And then just the last item is just me. I've been, we're putting the finishing touches on our use permit condition work with the county staff. And I have a few odds and ends left on my plate, and pretty soon I think we're going to be ready to just have that signed off on, and we'll be starting fresh with a common set of use permit condition TDM standards for all of our schools with use permits. And I guess, I don't know, Dennis, if at this point, so there are going to be some changes for staff, and this is perhaps just more pertinent for me, but we've got Melissa McMahon, who has been working with Jeff Chambers and I on the use permit condition stuff, and I think was with Jim Larson's staff for quite some time. We'll be moving into, or at least temporarily, or in an acting role as parking program manager. Is that right, Dennis?
That is correct, but we are going to make sure that nothing that she was working on with ACCS is dropped, and Melissa will continue to provide support. So we recognize that the implementation of the TDM for schools is very important, and we'll make sure that that work continues.
Great. And Stephen Krim, who was in the parking manager position for TE&O, will be moving over to DDOT to do some similar work there, he told me. So just some movement for the folks that we've been working with. Okay, since we have Christine.
Yes, Christine, do you need to share your screen, or do you how do you want to do this?
Yes, if you don't mind, I'll share a PowerPoint.
All you.
Yeah, and I apologize for being late. I was teaching an outdoor yoga class for the women's transportation seminar tonight. So I appreciate
exciting.
Being able to be in 2 places at once, or at least within the same 2 hours.
Well, as you missed at the beginning of the meeting, we are trying as hard as we can to keep these meetings virtual as long as we can, because it allows flexibility for everyone.
Absolutely. That's great. So yeah, here, I know it said Vision Zero updates on the agenda, and this is our big update. And then Zara covered another thing that will be at the Our Shared Streets event, which we're really excited about. So we encourage folks to stop by, and it will be Nate and Sam Murray, and they'll be doing 2 truths and a lie about transportation facts. So that'll be really fun. And then, you know, we are working towards these school slow zones, which is our focus tonight. We are requesting to advertise the reduction of speed limits to the county board, hopefully at the October board meeting, which will then lead us to the actual adoption at the November meeting. So this is all a proposal that will be going to the county board, and kind of how we're planning to make conditions safer around schools. So tonight I'll run through just kind of the purpose and need, how we'll be setting new school slow zones, what they'll look like, where we're proposing to do the first demonstrations, and then how we'll plan to collect data and feedback in the timeline going forward. So, you know, slower speeds around schools is a no-brainer. 1 in 4 crashes in Arlington involve speeding, and every year there's about 10 or more crashes involving speeding around schools. And we all know that the risk of injuries and deaths increases as vehicle speeds increase. So, you know, this is a priority for us to make conditions safer for our most vulnerable users, and that includes children around schools. And, you know, as part of the Vision Zero action plan, we set forth in creating new school zone guidelines. And that includes, you know, the entire school zone. So how do we set the speeds, what the typical signage and markings and crosswalks and other aspects look like? So, you know, as we are starting to develop those guidelines, we plan to make all schools in Arlington, you know, all school zones either 20 or 25 miles per hour as part of the guidelines. And then, you know, the purpose of these demonstrations is to test how we will be deploying 20-mile-per-hour slow zones around schools. So we have created the criteria where if it's an arterial street within 600 feet of school access, we will reduce speed limits to either 20 or 25 miles per hour, depending on the speed limit of that road. We don't have many 35 or to 45 mile per hour roads, so I think we'll be seeing mostly 20 mile per hour speed limits, delineated with a beacon. So it flashes at arrival and dismissal times. There is the exception. There are several VDOT roads where we are not allowed to reduce the speed limit to 20 miles per hour yet. We are having those conversations with VDOT now. But then this focus here is on these local neighborhood streets within 600 feet of a school access point, where we are suggesting that all roads will be 20 miles per hour all the time. So the speed limit sign will just say 20 miles per hour, no time frame, just all the time, safe speeds. So the way we are proposing that this rolls out is the 20 mile per hour speed limit sign with the school over top. We've debated kind of different ways of doing that, but we landed on the school sign and the speed limit sign because we do want people to know they're entering a school zone. And then for the time being, we'll also have the new orange signs on top that just help to signal to the driver this is something new for at least the first couple months. And then we'll also have 20 mile per hour markings on the road, which helps to kind of signal to the driver to slow down, especially as you're coming from one of the more, you know, higher volume arterial streets onto a neighborhood street. We'll have end of school zone signs to help signify the end of the school zones. And then we'll be updating the crosswalks within our school slow zones so that they all kind of match and are consistent in terms of the markings and the school sign, which you can see that pentagon shape with the people. And then for the areas where we are proposing a school slow zone on a local or neighborhood street that already has flashers, we're just going to remove the when flashing from those flashers because we're not going to just rip all of our flashers out right now. But we do want to make sure it's clear that the speed limit is 20 miles per hour all the time. So I mentioned we're going to do a handful of demonstration locations before we go countywide. And this is for a couple of reasons. The main reason being that this will be a resource lift, and it is, you know, it takes a lot of time to create the plans. We'll have to update the signage and the pavement markings. So we want to, number one, make sure that we, you know, have the plans, or that this is something that we can, sorry, I got distracted by Jillian's question. We'll get to that in a minute, but I want to get through this first. So we picked these, or we picked to do demonstration locations because we want to make sure it works before we deploy it countywide. That's the important thing. We want to make sure we're effectively reducing speeds. So we have identified schools where there are existing beacons that need immediate replacement. So we're reassessing those school zones because we don't want to put back beacons where we might not propose them in the future because of the static school zone. We also identified 3 schools because of Vision Zero's commitment to equity. So those are schools in MWCOG designated equity emphasis areas and are near our high injury network. And then we also identified the schools that are new coming in, or the school swaps, where we're reassessing those school zones anyway. So that is the reason for the 12 locations. And we anticipate to continue to roll this out in other parts or other schools in the county, you know, on a manageable basis where, you know, we can spend time to create the plans and then roll out all the materials. And, you know, we also, as I mentioned, want to make sure this works before we just start putting everything everywhere and then might have to change something up. So it helps us to maintain that flexibility and assess as we go. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the school plans because I know this is a limited agenda and we could talk about them all night. But I will give you this presentation afterwards so you can take a look and you can get back with any questions to me directly. But you can see as an example here is Tuckahoe. So we have our beacons on Sycamore Street, which are 20 miles per hour because that's an arterial. And then 26th Street North currently has flashers, but that would qualify as a slow zone because it's a local neighborhood street. So we'll keep those flashers, but we'll just remove the when flashing to reinforce it's 20 miles per hour all the time. Then we also have Tuckahoe, 24th Street, and North Underwood Street. And we'll have pavement markings here as you come off Lee Highway to help signify, hey, you've just entered this slow zone. Similar conditions on Glebe. Claremont and Wakefield are actually combined because they're the 600-foot buffer from the access points actually intersects. So this kind of made it an easy marriage of the 2 slow zones. We have St. Thomas More, which actually had flashers on Glebe, which is actually not very close to one of their access points. So we are not recommending to replace the flashers on Glebe, but we are adding a slow zone on Cathedral and North Thomas. And Cathedral Lane has actually been on one of our hotspot lists, so hopefully the slower speeds there can help. Hoffman Boston, Gunston Middle School, Drew Elementary School, Escuela Key, which is in the former Arlington traditional property. Why is that a duplicate? Sorry. Arlington Traditional Elementary School slow zone, which is former McKinley. The Innovation Elementary School, which is the former Key site. And then last but not least, Cardinal Elementary School. which actually this school zone reaches all the way over to Swanson. So that creates a nice long slow zone, or long slow zone along Washington Boulevard. And this should actually say VDOT. I don't know what happened. I made edits to the presentation that maybe didn't copy over, but on Washington Boulevard and on Glebe, we are not sure if we'll be able to lower the speed limit to 20 miles per hour. So I will fix that before I send this presentation out, just to make sure it's clear that those are VDOT roads. We don't have as much control, but we are going to push to have those speed limits lower. So I mentioned before, we're going to be collecting before and after data to see how this works. And right now we are going to begin before and after speed data collection. We wanted to do that after school started. So now that school's in session, we'll be collecting the speed, and then we'll also collect after data in the spring. So that way we have apples to apples comparison of what do speeds look like once we deploy these slow zones and what's the impact. And then we also plan to gather feedback from the community during the demonstration. And that feedback will really not be centered around, do you want lower speed limits? Because we know that might be, something that a lot of people don't want. But, the point is we want these to be effective. We want them to help reduce speeds, and we want to make conditions safer around schools. So we will be asking people, how effective was this in your, perception and observations and experiences, and identify ways to possibly improve those school slow zones as we roll out more. So really, we're excited to get feedback. And then one thing, I also wanted to mention is, ACPD is a partner in this effort, so they are going to actually help us collect some of that speed data, and they will be with us every step of the way in terms of the communication and outreach, giving warnings at the beginning of the project, and then eventually enforcing the slow zone speed limits once we get past a warning period. So overall, this is our proposed timeline. We'll be collecting before speed data and then after speed data, developing the RTA now, which will go to the county board in October, and then hopefully be approved in November, and rolling out communications alongside those county board meetings, and then hopefully implementing the slow zones in December, and then continuing the education, warnings, and enforcement leading into the spring. So I will stop there. I saw lots going on in the chat. No worries. So Dan, you might be able to give more background on why we went with 20 instead of 15.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start out. Again, I think like you're saying, Christine, we want to see the change implemented quickly and effectively, and we felt like that was the right balance point, because we know we got to engage with the community, and a lot of these are in people's neighborhood streets. So if we can set a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit and get people to drive 20, we feel that that's in the right direction that we want to go. And again, this is us trying to figure out the best way to start this quickly, because I see some of the other comments in the chat. I think John put in that are we making physical changes? And the intent of this is to start this program quickly and to see if the changes are effective. So while we're not making physical changes, we are doing the signage that is hopefully clear, but we're also doing the in-street pavement markings in some places that is different and kind of hopefully really alerts people to the change in condition. So this is just the quickest way that we could figure out to roll it out and to really start making a change that we see is really important.
Yeah, we are, John, to answer your question, we are looking at all of the crosswalks and making sure that all of them have the school signage and the high visibility crossing pavement markings. So we are doing some retrofitting to make sure, all of the conditions meet what we will recommend as our standard school zone guidelines. So there will be small infrastructure improvements to begin with, but not the large scale things that you had mentioned. And then in terms of VDOT pushing back, I can't speak for VDOT. I know we have I honestly don't know how the conversation will go. So we will do what we can and push as much as we can. And Dan, you may know better than me.
Yeah, I can answer a little bit with VDOT is, so what we're doing with these locations is to, again, implement and these initial locations just to see how it works, right? We're doing it without a speed study. With VDOT, you have to do a formal speed study in order to make that change. So it's a little bit longer process with VDOT, but we're going to do the work and try to get VDOT to support the changes that we're recommending. But again, it's a different process because it's an actual speed study we have to do with VDOT, whereas we're just going out and doing it and seeing like, is it going to work? And we hope it does. But these types of things, when we do it, we make adjustments to make them more effective.
Great. And as far as ACPD enforcing, I think we want them to enforce it strictly. That will be our recommendation. That will, at the end of the day, be an ACPD decision. But we, they're an incredible partner in the Vision Zero effort and have been very supportive. And I think they would like to help us. So I expect that it will be a 20-mile-per-hour enforcement, not like it's a 25 zone. And then great mentioning that, Kristen. I totally forgot to say that we have spent a lot of time meeting with principals because we recognize that every school has its own nuances, issues, maybe access points that staff don't know about. So we, have had a meeting with 9 out of the 11 APS schools to see, make sure we're capturing their conditions right, get their sign off. And then we did meet with St. Thomas More. So we're working on those last 2 meetings, but hopefully they'll go smooth.
And Christine, I put a comment in the chat that, as a driver, when you see the sign school, you have a certain thought. And I think you should be careful on that signage, or maybe with the new include new 24/7, because when I see school and it's 2:00 in the morning on a Saturday, or it's a weekend or a federal holiday, drivers might have a different perception when they see that signage. It's going to be an education campaign to go along with that.
Yes, we've had lots of discussion about whether the signage should specify all times. Right now, the idea was not to put it, but it's something that we can add using another plate. So that is kind of a back pocket. If we see this isn't working, maybe we need to specify. But as you also mentioned, the outreach is absolutely critical. So we are going to be messaging this out to each school with their map, and then as well as countywide, APS wide and ACPD countywide communications, letting people know that these are coming, what to expect, and really just make sure that people understand it in advance. And we'll also have that available in at least 5 languages. The principals that we've met with have specified Spanish, Mongolian, Arabic, and Amharic as critical languages to have this translated to. So the materials will certainly be translated in those, and possibly more if we hear the need for it.
Well, thank you very much for all of this. As people think of more, could you drop your email in the chat just to make sure people have that? I'm sure we do, but let's have that there.
One quick point before we move over. The 20 miles per hour, I think, by the way, I think it makes complete sense. But how feasible that will be on 600 feet is like 200 meters from the school. So on the main road, like I live not far from Washington and Stafford Street. Washington Boulevard has 2 lanes for each side. And Glebe Road the same. How feasible is the 20 miles per hour on those roads? Because it's different than 20 miles per hour or even 15 on Stafford Street, which goes to the high school. On Washington, I mean, it's one of the major arteries. So I'm not quite sure, even if for me, even 15 would be fine. But I don't know in terms of the commercial business and also commuters on those main roads. I don't know how feasible and enforcing that is, and how well accepted would be on the main roads.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. We experienced as we I think 2 years ago when Dorothy Ham opened, we lowered the speed limit on Lee Highway, because we added the new entrance to the school, and the speed limit was lowered to 25 miles per hour, I think, from 30. But, you know, we saw cars slow down. Was it as much as we wanted? Maybe not. So I think that's where some of the enforcement and the warnings need to come in. You know, because we've seen in the past, yeah, it's harder to get cars to slow down on these larger roads where they're more used to driving fast. So I think that's where enforcement comes in, plays a big role. And, you know, I think we'll have to get creative. Maybe we'll use some of ACPD's variable messaging signs that they have to help us enforce the speeds from the get-go. So I think that's a great thing to point out, to focus on. Dan?
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing. You know, on the arterial streets, the speed reductions are primarily during school opening and closing times, where the flashers are flashing during those lower speed reduced times. So it's not a 24/7 speed reduction like the 20-mile-an-hour signs like Christine was showing. The arterials are a temporary reduction that are indicated by flashers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. It's exciting to see the changes coming.
And I know, Kristen, you had listed speed cameras on the agenda too. We're not quite ready to talk about that, but we do anticipate having a community engagement on it soon and advancing that to the county board soon as well. So we will be back soon to talk about it.
Okay, future agenda item.
So the last thing, if I'm following this right, is the intersection at 18th and Patrick Henry around Cardinal Elementary. Kristen, how do we want to do this?
Yeah, so this one, let's see, Waya's not here. Sometimes we get Way to drive, and she kind of zips us around. Maybe Dan would like to, but I wanted to give little context for this. So this street is in the Cardinal walk zone, and we've gotten, there've been a number of emails from parents who have started to walk to school with their students, and then the community, as you know, who have been working on the Cardinal building with us about this particular intersection. So, and Dan and I were able to touch base a little bit on it this morning. I know, you know, there's been work done at this intersection. But I guess just this is a good segue from Christine's presentation on Vision Zero around schools. You know, I think one of the things that we have, you know, discussed is whether through Vision Zero and our, you know, work on school zones, you know, if there's something else or something different that we can have applied to this intersection that would help improve the crossing. So I know, Dennis, your team has been fielding a lot of traffic on this. We have obviously as well. I know Lauren mentioned the couple transportation nights that we had for families to talk about the area, and this came up. So I thought it would be, you know, now would be a good time to kind of bring it up, take a look at it, and maybe talk a little bit more about the possibilities with this group. So let's see. Dan, would you want to drive to this intersection? No pun intended, but Google Drive, rather.
Let me see if I can share. I will attempt.
Kristen, while Dan is bringing that up, I just want to give the group some context. So Patrick Henry is an arterial street, but it has been the subject of a whole series of neighborhood conservation projects that have been closely coordinated with transportation. This used to be a 4-lane arterial with really wide crossings for pedestrians. We've had a total of 3 projects in the corridor, all aimed at improving bicycle and pedestrian safety and accessibility. We've removed 2 travel lanes, added landscape median islands, and the intersection, if Dan, you could pull, maybe increase the size of this. This intersection was dramatically transformed. The intersection with 18th and Patrick Henry used to go all the way back to that curving sidewalk to the upper right. So this intersection was enormous. And so we've taken out parking lanes, put in extended nubs. We provided a fairly wide pedestrian refuge, at least on one leg of Patrick Henry on that side. So there really is room for a number of people to actually stand and wait. So we've done a lot of physical changes to the corridor to try to rebalance it, to make it more pedestrian and bicycle friendly. I think we still have some behavioral problems with the people that use the street. This is the subject of an active engineering investigation. So there was a community C3 request, and that is being processed by our TE&O operations staff, looking at issues like traffic and crashes, and any data that we have on speeds, to look at really what is happening at this intersection and in the corridor more generally. So that's just some context for the group.
Thanks, Dennis.
But a lot of what you see there didn't exist some years ago. Almost everything has been rebuilt or remarked or re-signed. Actually, that looks like a really old. That looks like an outdated image. I might be wrong.
Yeah, this is very much outdated. This is what my computer's giving me right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not what's out there today. That was pre-intervention.
Here we go.
That actually is that's better.
Yeah.
I think that this is Lauren. I've been out there crossing with families, and the curve and the hill are pretty daunting. So regardless of how much you have to cross there, the sight lines are pretty scary. So we put as many flags out there as we can, but there's only so much we can do to calm their nerves and slow traffic.
Dan, do you recall what the posted speed is? Is it 25 or 30?
I think it's 25.
Yes.
Just temporarily too, we've asked police to put a variable messaging sign on the north side of the intersection, just as vehicles would approach the hill and the curve. But I don't know if it's out there yet. That was just as of yesterday, we put that request in.
So the curve and the hill, is that, we're looking at the intersection, is it behind where we're looking?
We're looking southbound, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's going down here, so you can see it goes up farther.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And Lauren, when you were out the other day, about how many families did you encounter?
It was about 25 people, I would say maybe 7 or 8 families.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we've got a, sort of changing nature of the intersection, or changing condition with the intersection. Now we've got families trying to cross, theoretically during rush hours, Cardinal's a 9 o'clock start. So families are making their way over there probably between 8:30, 8:25, 8:30. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of the things you're mentioning are things that in the engineering study will be evaluated. You mentioned sight lines, driver yielding, etc. So this is all good feedback to figure out what provides what measures might provide the best accommodations.
Has this location ever been evaluated for like a 4-way stop or?
Well, that will be part of the evaluation going forward.
But has not historically been, I guess. So this is to your knowledge, I guess.
I think that there was an evaluation dating some years, multiple years back. But again, part of what we're discussing with, Cardinal being open, that is changing things at this intersection. So, what we need to do is recollect some data and reevaluate based off of the existing conditions.
Okay.
And Dan, this also links back to the presentation that Christine just gave on slow streets. Given that this was basically a new program locating here, this is in our first tranche of slow streets proposals, I believe.
Yes, it is. And we extended, it actually wasn't within fully the 600 feet buffer, but we extended it out to this intersection based on our conversation with the school.
Yeah, no, that was a good conversation. I'm also going to I'm just going to put in the chat the link to the bus eligibility map for Cardinal, so you get a sense of where families are coming from to get to this site. And we had also created, I think Lauren mentioned earlier in the meeting, a couple of navigation maps for families to get around Cardinal. And then just recently, and based on the feedback about this location, also put together some bullets for, finding your way around this intersection. So maybe not necessarily using it, and suggesting, a different path, but I think it's a longer path. Is that, correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren? Takes them a little out of their way.
Yeah, that's correct. It would take them down to 16th where there are stops, 4-way stop sign.
Yeah. So I think the community will, be glad to hear that, there's an investigation that will take place of this particular intersection. So thank your staff for tackling that, Dennis.
One intersection at a time. That's how we get this done, right?
Yeah. And Kristen, I'll add, I think one of the other ACTC meetings you had brought up 18th in Ohio, which is a little bit farther west. We'll be making some signage and marking improvements there in the next week or two, weather dependent, based off of some of the conversations we had in the past. And I think there was one other location too, I just might mention too. There was a request for additional enhancements at Wilson and George Mason, and we're planning on doing some improvements around there, some of which is reducing the number of travel lanes and extending the bicycle lanes, which end near Frederick, so extending them all the way to George Mason, and putting some treatments through the intersection which help pedestrians and bicyclists navigate the intersection better, particularly connecting to the Bluemont Junction Trail.
Dan, just since we're actually reflecting on the feedback that this committee provides and what we do with it, also mention that the speed limit on Kirkwood was lowered. So that is now in place, and that was important for this committee in terms of the walk zone crossing from Lion Village over to the school site on the west of Kirkwood. So we actually do take your feedback, and it ultimately gets rolled into actual improvements in the field.
And Dennis, I want to say thank you for that, because, and that's, the whole goal of this, right, is that the community comes together, we identify the problems, and within the constraints we have, make some improvements to it. Kristen, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Nope, I just said we're glad that it's useful, because yeah, one intersection at a time, making our streets safer for the families and kids getting to school.
Well, and I will point out to say it's not, kids and families get to school, but schools are also recreational centers, even, even if they're not indoor things, that on the weekends and holidays, the general public gets to take advantage of these safer crossings. So thank you all on that one. Kristen, where are we at? Or have we come to the end of the road? Because I want to make a sales pitch for the committee before we roll out of here.
Yeah, I think that we've come to the end of our agenda. So thank you, everyone, for presentations, conversation, etc.
So my sales pitch is this committee, as we can see, does great work, but we're losing members and having a hard time replacing members. And when I get applications, what happens is you're asked to apply and rank choice your application, and ACTC often is number 4 or 5, and every committee is always looking for members. So I'm going to put the link in the chat that if you know somebody who you think would add to this committee, would you please share this link with them? I can't just appoint anyone. You have to fill out the application. So if you've got somebody, or you're on various listservs or Facebook groups or whatever, I would encourage you to drop this link and say, hey, put ACTC as your first choice. Catherine says some students. Yes, we had a student apply, and ACTC was number 5 on their choice list. So,
Catherine,
if you
feel free to talk it up amongst your students, since we had a very successful student from HB Woodlawn.
Someone who is in control of the announcements on Canvas for a school who could just put the link there, that would be cool. So just wherever, we would greatly appreciate an expansion of our pool. I come off this committee here at the end of the year, and I'd like to leave it fully staffed for the next person, which would be Elizabeth. So with that, I will say a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
And I will assume none opposed, and I thank everyone for their service this evening. And like I said, we will continue to be virtual as long as the powers that be allow it to be so.
We can hope. Thanks
Yes.
a lot, Josh. Thank you all.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Well.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.